From Protection to Exploitation: How Vigilanteism Turns Justice into Spectacle, by Kevin David Mayo II. Erie Life Health and Surety. Power to the people. You ever see those predator catching videos just randomly while you're scrolling? And I hate to be that guy, but I can't help but for noticing a pattern. It's normally unshapely, foreign-speaking, mostly black and brown men getting confronted by mostly white men. And I don't want to make this about race, but it's definitely something worth noting. Out of all the predator catching groups I can think of, the only black ones I can rattle off the top of my head are Skeeter Jean and Gideon. And let me be clear, I see both of them as net negatives to society. Some of the worst content farmers out there, profiting off of a piqued fear and interest in child sex crimes. Any profiting off the subject that's not actively working to solve the problem, and that includes content farming by interviewing these weirdos for shits and giggles, is inherently adding to the problem, and by that logic, complicit. I refuse to do that. So allow me to be direct. Vigilante predator catching groups are wrong. Not misguided, not ineffective, actively harmful. And I'm going to prove it with data instead of vibes-based reasoning that dominates this conversation. And let's talk about the vibes over evidence problem. People routinely answer legitimate, important, and consequential questions about life, society, and character with feelings rather than evidence. When we see something that makes us angry, like child predators, our instinct is to support anything that looks like it's addressing the problem. Confrontation videos feel satisfying, like you're actively helping by watching them. Public humiliation feels like justice, and viral content feels like you're spreading awareness. None of that tells us whether these groups actually protect children. And look, I don't want you to lose me here. Check all my hard drives, look through all my shit. I'm squeaky fucking clean. You can stamp that. But I need to restate this fact. None of those vibes I just rattled off, none of those confrontation videos, nothing that society has cooked up in this modern era to deal with this very real issue has been sufficient in actually protecting and improving the lives of children. If you want to understand whether something is genuinely helpful, you need to do three things. 1, define the quark or phenomena precisely. 2, use outcome measures that actually map to what you care about. And 3, design your analysis to avoid causal traps. Let's do that. 3 buckets that get blended together. You could pretty much divide these 3 movements against child predators into 3 buckets that get blended together by mainstream consciousness. Here's the problem. At least 3 categories of vigilante activity get collapsed into one. And treating them all as if they're the same thing is how we end up defending the indefensible. So let me be clear. I'm not putting myself in a position where I'm defending any creeps or weirdos. I'm not going to be an apologist for any of this shit. This is purely an analytical study, and by the time we're done here, I feel like my point will be unimpeachable. So without further ado, let's talk about these different buckets. Bucket number 1, performative citizen child predator catches. This is what everyone is familiar with. This is what you see on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok. Basically, they're adult decoys posing as minors. They start off with some sort of a invitation, or some sort of a like lure. They record the confrontations designed for maximum drama. They have immediate social media distribution, and the police may be called afterward if it helps the narrative. Groups like Predator Poachers, Dads Against Predators, Alex Rosen, Skeeter Jean, and at least 160 of these groups operate in the United States right now. That's insane. 160 YouTube channels that cover this shit all the time. How does this not serve degeneracy? With some trackers counting nearly 1,000 amateur stings, and are there really that many child predators in the United States? Like 160,000 predators? Really? One group alone, Bikers Against Predators, claims over 310 catches since 2010. The key feature is the performance is the whole point. These aren't private interventions. And look, I don't think once you get past that point, you're worthy of private intervention. You know what I mean? There's no reform if you're above the age of 16 and doing this shit. Groups capture encounters specifically to post on social media platforms, generating millions of views and monetization revenue. Academic research shows that these hunters spend as much time online following other hunting teams as actually conducting stings. It's driven by social media engagement and community identity, not child protection outcomes. And, it feels good when everyone's posting the memes, but that's a problem. It's purely cathartic, and that catharsis replaces actual action. The confrontation isn't a means to an end in those cases. The confrontation is the end. Next, we have bucket number 2, victim and family interception. This one is fundamentally different. A parent or guardian discovers suspicious chats involving their child and responds to protect them. That's still civilian intervention, but it's not performative. If they're recording, it's to document evidence for law enforcement rather than to farm content. The primary motive is protecting a specific child that's in their care, someone that they have a legal standing over as a guardian. And there's no viral content goal, no public spectacle, and no community status to gain. This can all be protective in specific, limited circumstances. And by all intents and purposes, it's probably the most understandable and reasonable course to take. A parent has every right to protect their child and provide evidence to law enforcement as a citizen report. The same with as any tip or complaint. And if the creeper weirdo gets his ass beat for being a weirdo, at least it's being done in the privacy of family instead of being thrown out in the streets for Tatiana to watch in bed at 3 a.m. over in Wichita, Kansas. Here's a critical point. Bucket 2 does not generalize to bucket 1. And let me break that down again. Big Uncle Kev coming to beat up some creeper weirdo that messaged one of my younger relatives off Roblox. That's not the same thing as bucket 1. Even if I were to record it, even if I were to monetize it, it's my family. I have the right to protect them. We cannot allow that catharsis to muddy the waters and confuse us. The fact that a parent can legitimately intervene to protect their own child doesn't mean that strangers can do this for social media clout. Seeing this happen amongst families and getting the idea for content doesn't make it right, valid, or even wise for you to emulate that behavior. And last but not least, we have bucket number 3, professional law enforcement undercover operations. This is the standard. Trained investigators who know the law, controlled evidence handling with proper chain of custody, coordination with prosecutors before charges are filed, constitutional protections like Miranda rights, proper search warrants, and entrapment avoidance. Law enforcement can't bring up anything about sex first in their stings. That would constitute entrapment. And I'm going to say that again very slowly and clearly. Law enforcement can't bring up anything about sex first in their stings. That would constitute entrapment. They follow strict procedures specifically designed to produce admissible evidence that survives appeals. They coordinate with prosecutors to ensure that the case will actually stick. And the results speak for themselves. Law enforcement ran sex sting operations have conviction rates between 70 to 95%. That's not an accident. It's what happens when you follow rules designed to produce justice rather than content. And here's my hypothesis, and I'm going to go ahead and prove it with data why this distinction matters. Bucket 1 is net harmful. It fails on every measurable outcome and creates extensive documented harms. Bucket 2 can be protective in limited circumstances where a guardian is protecting their specific child. And bucket 3 actually works. Professional operations achieve the justice outcomes that vigilantes claim to have wanted. The problem is that defenders of bucket 1 constantly invoke bucket 2 and bucket 3 to justify their actions. They'll say shit like, check this guy's hard drive. He's one of them. He's a creep. Shame is utilized to crush all dissent and label it as defense. They'll also say, wouldn't you want someone to help if that was your kid? Yes, that's bucket 2, and that's not what you're doing. And they'd also say something like, law enforcement does things too. And yes, that's bucket 3, and you're not law enforcement. Conflating these categories is rhetorical sleight of hand. So let's examine each bucket against actual measurable outcomes. All right, so let's next define what good for society actually means. Strip away the emotion. If vigilante operations were genuinely helping, we'd see measurable improvements in at least one of these areas. Number 1, better justice system outcomes. We'd see higher charge rates and conviction rates for online enticement cases, lower case attrition, fewer cases dropped due to evidence issues, unlawful processes, or credibility problems. And we'd also see stronger prosecutions that survive appeals. Harm prevention outcomes. We'd see fewer incidents of online enticement and child sexual exploitation, reduce severity of exploitation. We'd have faster identification of children in immediate danger and disruption of predator networks and centralized hubs. And last but not least, we have fewer unintended harms. We'd see no increase in failed prosecutions due to contaminated evidence. We'd see no violence or self-harm events around confrontation. We'd see no misidentification and doxing of innocent people. And we'd see no collateral damage to families and communities. Now that we have all these tools built out for us, let's go ahead and see what the evidence actually shows for each bucket. All right, bucket number 1, the performance that fails every test. Justice system outcomes in bucket number 1 are a complete fucking disaster. Let's start with the most basic measure. Do these catches result in prosecutions? Musa Harris, a prominent predator catcher, claims 620 catches since 2020. The Luzerne County DA admitted that many weren't prosecuted due to insufficient evidence. How many defendants were actually sentenced or are facing charges in court? 13. That's roughly 2%. So, like, if Musa Harris were to have like a banger week or month and catch 100 predators from December 2025 to January 2026, he'd have 2 catches. Now, this isn't an outlier. In Collins County, Texas, the district attorney declined to prosecute all 23 cases from to catch a predator sting, citing insufficient evidence and jurisdictional issues. In Clearfield County, Pennsylvania, at least a dozen cases were withdrawn after a judge ruled that the unlawful contact with the minor statute requires an actual minor or certified law enforcement officer, not a vigilante playing dress up online. In another Pennsylvania case, 270 felony child pornography cases against Thomas Hibbard were dismissed because the case stemmed from predator poachers' vigilante operation. The judge ruled that sexual communications with an adult posing as a child only constitute a crime if the decoy is law enforcement. In South Carolina, prosecutors note that if someone pretends to be a minor, but the person pretending is 16 years or older, there is no crime under state law. Much of the discovery and information from vigilante groups is simply inadmissible. And I mean, isn't it obvious? Like, this is a pattern, not a series of unfortunate exceptions. Prosecutors across the country are explicit. Vigilante evidence doesn't meet legal standards. Cases built on it fall apart, and these operations create more problems than what they solved. Even when cases do get charged, even when one of these stick, the conviction rate is abysmal. Fewer than half of the individuals arrested in Datelin's To Catch a Predator segments have been convicted as of 2007. That's less than 50%. Compare that to bucket 3, law enforcement operations with 70 to 90% conviction rates. That gap isn't subtle. It's the difference between professional standards designed to achieve justice and amateur social media theatrics designed to achieve views. Now, the harm prevention aspect is also important because there's zero evidence that this works. Maybe convictions don't matter if these groups are preventing harm before it happens, right? Deterring would be predators through the fear of exposure, except that there's no evidence in that either. Online enticement reports to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, or NCMEC for short, increased 192% in 2024. And this happened during the documented surge in vigilante activity. If these groups were providing any deterrent effect whatsoever, we'd expect the opposite trend. You can't claim that you're protecting children when the thing that you claim to be stopping is increasing at unprecedented rates during your supposed intervention. Law enforcement warns that vigilante confrontations make things worse. After being publicly exposed, suspects go home and wipe their devices, destroying evidence that could have been used in a real investigation. Former FBI agents note this explicitly. The confrontation gives them time to destroy evidence before law enforcement can properly investigate with warrants. San Diego police stated explicitly that they don't support cyber vigilantes, warning that vigilante activity may push predators further underground rather than stopping them. When you teach predators that how they got caught, you're teaching them to be more careful, not to stop. Former FBI agent Greg Rogers warns that these operations don't target networks or systemic problems. They target individuals for content. There's no disruption of exploitation hubs, no faster identification of children in actual danger, and no meaningful impact on the infrastructure that enables abuse. Just viral videos that feel satisfying, but ultimately accomplishes nothing. Next, we get to documented harms. These are extensive and serious. Let's talk about what Bucket 1 operations actually accomplish. First things first, we have failed prosecutions. We already covered the abysmal prosecution rate, but let's be clear about what this means. Hundreds of cases dismissed or dropped because vigilantes contaminated evidence, violated procedures, or operated outside of legal frameworks. Every dismissed case is a person who faced public accusation, they were doxxed online, had their face and information spread to millions. Oftentimes they're viciously beaten and abused. If they're lucky, all they get is slapped. But they ultimately walk free. Not because of some technicality, but because the evidence that was illicitly collected was done in an entrapping format and it won't hold up in court. If you wanted these people prosecuted, vigilante operations achieves the opposite. Now, let's talk about violence and physical harm. In Maryland, a vigilante confrontation involving college students turned violent. Surprise, fucking surprise, resulting in multiple arrests for assault and hate crimes. The target was in a state where the age of consent was 16, meaning that even if everything happened as claimed, no crime occurred, but violence did. In Winston-Salem, a vigilante group assaulted the man that they were confronting at a Target. Experts warn that highly confrontational situations create a high probability of violence. A cameraman working with Joshua Mundy was shot during a sting operation inside what looked like a Walmart or a Kroger. There was some sort of a kerfuffle, some sort of gun discharge inside the store, and the video ended before security or police arrived. As of that recording, it's unclear whether that man is alive or dead right now. The group Dads Against Predators in Northern California has been criticized for violent tactics, with members alluding to additional violence occurring off camera. Law enforcement expressed concerns that they may end up killing someone or being killed themselves. Clay County Detective Ryan Ellis explicitly warned that these confrontations can involve armed suspects with violent histories and extensive criminal records. You're not confronting cartoon villains, you're confronting real people in uncontrolled environments with zero backup and zero training, telling them you're about to ruin their life. Which takes us to our next point. Deaths by suicide or self-deletion. Multiple people have died by self-deletion after being accused by vigilante groups before any judicial finding of guilt. The Yorkshire Police Department in UK documented this pattern, noting that accused individuals become vulnerable to self-harm when their information is publicized online. The UK Crown Prosecution Service explicitly warns that online child abuse activist groups, or OCOGs, create risks including self-harm fueled by online publicity. I mean, and that's only logical because everyone hates bad guys. These aren't people who were convicted, however, and couldn't live with consequences. These are people who were accused, doxxed, and driven to death before any court determined whether that accusation was even valid. I think I covered a case about Nautica Malone earlier this year. The drive-through gooner in a Hellcat. He went to some friggin' Starbucks or a Hooters, getting coffee, and his dick was out, and then he was killed himself later that night. Next, we have wrongful accusations and targeting vulnerable populations. A pediatrician's home was vandalized after self-styled vigilantes confused the professional's title with pedophile. The Dads Against Predators were accused of targeting developmentally disabled men in some instances, even too. Vigilante activities have included harassment of families of accused persons, people who had nothing to do with any alleged crime but became targets because of their relationship to the j'accuse. And then we have the law enforcement resource diversion aspect of the case. Police have to investigate vigilante operations themselves, verify that groups follow necessary standards, and attempt to salvage cases that may have already been compromised. Law enforcement officials state that vigilante groups add another investigative layer. Police must ensure that the group operated by the necessary standards, risking cases being lost on technicalities a lot of time. These aren't resources spent protecting children. They're resources spent cleaning up after the fucking vigilantes. In Missouri, the leader of predator poachers was arrested after the group attempted a sting that ended up interfering with legitimate law enforcement officials. Evidence destruction and compromised investigations. That's another key thing that happens with interruption from vigilantes, because after vigilante confrontations, suspects return home and wipe all their devices, destroying evidence and make it harder for law enforcement to build a case. This is a direct quote from former FBI agents who have dealt with the aftermath. You're not catching predators. You're teaching them how to avoid real law enforcement. So here's the verdict on bucket one. By every measurable outcome based on what we all discussed and verified and agreed upon during this nice little tirade, the justice system outcomes have have a catastrophic failure of a 2 to 15% prosecution versus a near 100% charge rate for law enforcement. Once again, this vigilante shit has about a 2 to 15% chance of working. Let's call it 7%. Conviction rates are below 50% versus 70 to 90%, 95% of professional operations. So if you're one of the fucking creeps that get caught by one of these vigilante groups, congratulations, you have better than 50% odds of getting off. Next, we have case attrition. Massive hundreds of dismissed cases have happened because of vigilanteism, posting the people online. Next, we have harm prevention. We have zero evidence that exploitation, that vigilanteism reduces harm. Exploitation reports increased 192% during vigilante surge, meaning reports more than doubled because of the surge of this dumb shit. But yay, raised awareness. And then we got incident reduction, none measurable. There's no measure of this slowing down. In fact, there's indicators that it increased. Network disruption, none. Because let's be honest, the swinging side to side in the mud shit, it's cute, it's cathartic, but we want the associates of Jeffrey Epstein and Sean Combs. Realistically speaking, right? That's the point of all this shit, right? We want the politicians, the people in power. No, I'm not saying spare the lower weirdo peons. I mean, like a pedophile is a pedophile. I'm just saying we're kind of missing the point. Violence. It's documented extensively. It's almost disgusting. Once again, it's mostly white men beating up mostly black and brown men, almost forcing them to beg for forgiveness. Wrongful accusations have been documented extensively. Deaths related to this have been documented extensively, and resource diversion has been documented extensively. Bucket 1, vigilanteism provides zero measurable benefits and creates extensive documented harms. The performance of justice is not justice. It's exploitation wearing the mask of righteousness. Now we have bucket number 2, when family protection is legitimate. Now we talk about this because this is where the conversation gets deliberately muddled. When parents discover that their child is being contacted by someone dangerous, they have every right to intervene. They're not performing for cameras. They're not farming content. They're protecting someone that they have legal guardianship and providing evidence to law enforcement as any citizen might provide a tip. This can be genuinely protective. It provides immediate protection of a specific child at risk. Evidence is collected for a specific protective purpose rather than performance. This can be utilized to help law enforcement as a citizen report. No confrontation or any weirdo humiliation dynamics, and there's no interference with broader investigations. The critical distinction is this doesn't generalize to bucket number 1. The fact that a parent can protect their own child doesn't mean that strangers can run public stings. The fact that you'd want someone to help your kid doesn't mean that viral confrontation videos helps anyone else's kids. Bucket number 2 is about specific protective relationships and targeted intervention. Bucket number 1 is about content creation and social media engagement. They are not the same thing, and defenders of bucket number 1 constantly invoke bucket number 2 to justify their actions. Don't fucking let them. If that's not your kid, if you're just adjacent to it, or even worse, if you made up fucking lies to get in on the mess, you're worse. You're complicit. Last but not least, we have bucket number 3, what actually works. Law enforcement undercover operations achieve what vigilantes claim to want. They have a 70 to 95% conviction rate, not 2%, not 15%, not fewer than half, 70 to 95%. Why? Because they follow procedures specifically designed to produce admissible evidence. Constitutional protections like Miranda right warnings, they also include proper search warrants and chain of custody. And they exercise entrapment enforcement. Law enforcement can't bring up sex first. Prosecutor coordination before charges are filed. Law enforcement has professional training on evidence collection, and law enforcement operates in controlled environments with backup. A 2017 report evaluating 334 men convicted in law enforcement sex stings found 87% had no prior, concurrent, or subsequent convictions. These operations aren't catching people who haven't established patterns of criminal behavior, suggesting that the interventions work. Law enforcement doesn't generate viral content. They generate convictions. They don't teach predators to be more careful. They incapacitate them through the legal system. And that's the difference between bucket 3 and bucket number 1. Professional standards versus performative theater. You know what I mean? Like just end stage capitalism here. Why law enforcement opposes bucket number 1. The opposition from prosecutors and police isn't some conspiracy or evidence that the government is ran by pedophiles. I think the government might be ran by pedophiles. However, I cannot prove that, and I will not make that claim. What I'm saying is opposition from prosecutors and police isn't some conspiracy or evidence that the government is ran by pedophiles. It's about how evidence and legal procedure actually work. Vanderburgh County prosecutor Deanna Moores warned that actions by private, untrained, and sometimes armed individuals pose serious risk to the community and can undermine legitimate investigations. Evidence collected by untrained individuals is often inadmissible. The Wisconsin Department of Justice issued an unusually blunt public advisory. These operations endanger bystanders, interrupt investigations, and rarely lead to criminal charges and create legal challenges for prosecution. San Diego law enforcement explicitly stated that they don't support cyber vigilantes, warning that groups may endanger their own safety while pushing predators further underground. And Reading police discussed concerns about complicated child sexual predator cases and explicitly requested that Dads Against Predators work with their detective division, stating that they do not support physical attacks and that setting up public meetings and vigilante behavior is not going to end well. Prosecutors and police agencies across the country emphasize that cases built on vigilante evidence frequently fall apart, warning that amateur stings can derail justice and place people in danger. The UK Crown Prosecution Service, a completely different legal system with a completely different political pressure apparatus, reaches the same exact conclusion. Even well-intentioned operations disrupt legitimate covert investigations and create serious risks. This is unanimous professional consensus, not a cover-up. And here's the legal reality why all these cases fall apart. Courts have constitutional requirements for a reason. If we allow vigilante collected evidence for today for predators, we've established precedent for vigilante evidence tomorrow for any accusation. That's not a mere slippery slope argument. It's how legal precedent functions. I'm not making one of those you are here like style arguments. I'm going to break this down for you real quick. Here's the actual legal problem. Many state statutes require an actual minor or certified law enforcement officer. Vigilantes are neither. Judges across multiple jurisdictions have ruled that sexual communications with adults posing as children only constitute crimes when the decoy is law enforcement. Why? Because law enforcement operates under constitutional constraints. Number one, they can't initiate sexual conversation. That's entrapment. Initiating sexual conversation is entrapment. They coordinate with prosecutors. When you coordinate with a prosecutor, you have admissible evidence. You know what I mean? Like, prosecutors are like the court's lawyers, for lack of better words. The prosecutor is the representative of the court, either privately represented or publicly procured for public defense, or the state, or publicly elected to fight cases on behalf of the state, of the specific state that in which they operate. Prosecutors have a lot better grounding and knowledge on what exactly is admissible evidence, and when you get in their way, you kind of fuck everything up. Law enforcement also follows Miranda and search warrant procedures. You know what I mean? Like, all these things matter because, like, if you don't follow these procedures, the bad guy gets away with the crime. And last but not least, they maintain chain of custody, meaning evidence integrity. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of court systems, and police systems are rumored to have a quota. There's no measurable there's no measure for success in a law enforcement capacity, or in a municipal setting, other than more convictions and a decrease in crime rate. A decrease in crime rate means budget cuts. Means budget cuts and less hours. So obviously, they're gonna go for more convictions. With that being said, there's if the state picks up a case, if a state picks up a case due to public pressure, if the prosecutor needs to go up for re-election, or in order to defend the interests of the county, there are certain cases in which public pressure would take precedence over actual evidence. And I mean, there's that can be argued for quite a while as well. I think that was just like something worthy to throw out there, because I mean, like, we are talking about like false accusations, and I don't want to completely like say, law enforcement is good, because no, them motherfuckers is liars too. Vigilantes don't follow any of those rules, though. Their evidence doesn't meet statutory requirements, and the cases normally collapse. In Pennsylvania, counties have opposite legal interpretations. Some prosecute vigilante cases as a criminal attempt to commit unlawful contact. Others dismiss them entirely. Even in Luzerne County, the most friendly jurisdiction, the prosecution rate is abysmal. The law isn't protecting predators. The law is requiring that prosecution follows procedures designed to distinguish guilt from accusation. What actually helps children? If you genuinely want to protect children and not just perform protection for social media, here's what the evidence says works. You need to fund ICAC task forces properly. This can be done municipally. You can donate to these organizations. But the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration received nearly $480 million in 2024 for commercial vehicle inspections. ICAC task force funding falls short amid rising child exploitation threats. That's a policy choice, not an inevitability. I mean, in 2022, over 550,000 children in the U.S. were confirmed victims of abuse or neglect. The United States hosts more child sexual abuse material online than any other country, and we're underfunding the task forces designed to address it, and quite literally just spending that money on cooling barracks overseas, on heating, on HVAC in bunkers overseas. Next, we have platform accountability. Companies need real requirements for detecting and reporting exploitation, not just reactive responses to bad press. When adjusted for bundling, 29.2 million distinct incidents of child sexual exploitation were submitted to the cyber tip line in 2024. These platforms know what's happening, and they need to be held accountable for addressing it. Next, support professional investigations. Don't interfere with them. The 70 to 95% conviction rate for law enforcement operations exists because they follow procedures that result in admissible evidence. When vigilantes blow investigations for content, they're actively harming the professional work that actually achieves justice. Prevention education. Teaching children about online safety, consent, and how to report suspicious behavior prevents more harm than confrontation videos ever could. The majority of sexual solicitation teenagers receive online comes from peers or adults aged 18 to 21. Education helps young people recognize and report these situations. Next, we have treatment programs. We reduce recidivism among offenders, and that requires intervention, not just humiliation. Research shows that online sting offenders are often different from those caught in real victimization cases. Whiter, younger, and less likely to be married, with higher levels of victim empathy and impulse control. Intervention and treatment can work for these specific populations. And what doesn't help is viral confrontation videos, public humiliation before judicial findings, and contaminating evidence for real prosecutions, teaching predators to be more careful, or pushing predator networks underground. The uncomfortable truth about why this persists is these vigilante groups aren't symptoms of citizens stepping up where government falls. They're symptoms of a justice system perceived as underfunded and ineffective, and they make that system worse, not better. Clay County Detective Ryan Ellis noted that they saw a rise in vigilante groups several years back, and then a lull, and then recently an increase. Why the resurgent despite unanimous law enforcement opposition? And that brings us to the social media incentive. These groups generate millions of views. Alex Rosen has 57,000 YouTube subscribers, with these videos exceeding 300,000 views. The monetization and social status incentive is real, and it's directly conflicts with child safety. I mean, the more children that are in danger, the more fucked up shit that happens, the more Josh Mundy and Ashley Ford eat. That's just fact. Groups capture encounters specifically to post on YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok. The performance is the product. Academic research shows that hunters spend as much time following other hunting teams as conducting stings. It's driven by social media engagement and community identity, not child protection outcomes. The emotional satisfaction problem is real too. Public support for cyber vigilanteism stems from the perception that such groups provide security and relief from a public fear. Doxing acts as a cathartic tool where citizens feel that they're purging the society of a threat. Cyber vigilante groups claim to provide punishment and systematic change that traditional criminal justice cannot achieve. And it feels good to watch someone get confronted. It feels like justice. It feels like something is being done. But feelings aren't data. And justice isn't a feeling. It's an outcome. The symptom disease problem. These groups thrive on a lack of faith in the criminal justice system. And they're not wrong that the system has problems. I mean, I won't repeat any of the lies or any of the crazy allegations that, some of the weirdo conspiracy theorists will make. But I mean, the system definitely has real problems. ICAC underfunding is real, prosecution resource constraints are real, and platform accountability gaps are real. But vigilante operations don't fix any of those problems. They only make them worse. They consume resources, contaminate cases, and provide the emotional satisfaction of action without any of the actual results of said justice. They're treating the symptom by making the disease worse. And here's where we're going to go ahead and conclude. When protection becomes exploitation. My hypothesis was simple. Bucket number one, vigilante predator catching operations are net harmful. And after reviewing the evidence across justice system outcomes, harm prevention measures, and documented harms, that hypothesis is overwhelmingly supported by the information we just laid out and we agreed upon. Bucket number one, vigilanteism, achieves prosecution rates of 2 to 15% versus near 100% rates of charge for law enforcement. Conviction rates fall below 50% when versus 70 to 95% when charged by professionals. Massive case attrition through hundreds of dismissals and dropped charges when, you want to play vigilante. Zero measurable reduction in exploitation. Enticement reports increased by 192%. There's no network disruption, no faster child identification, and no systemic improvement. That's something else that surprises me about, child predator groups. Why don't you guys go after the human traffickers? Why don't you guys legit hang out in the mall parking lots where where this is legit happening, where it's, people targeting women and children, trying to kidnap them and sell them or force them into sexual slavery. Just a freebie there, guys. And by the way, check my hard drive. I'm a squeaky clean bitch. And last not least, documented violence, wrongful accusations, death by suicide, and evidence destruction. And we have interference with legitimate investigations and law enforcement resource division. Those are the fruits of online child predator sting vigilanteism. Meanwhile, they claim to protect children while generating content for social media platforms. Bucket number two, family of protection of specific children. Yes, 100% legitimate. It can be legitimate in some limited circumstances as well, though. And it definitely doesn't generalize to bucket number one. Defenders constantly invoke bucket number one to justify the indefensible. And then we have bucket number three, professional law enforcement operations. This actually works, and it achieves the justice outcomes that vigilantes claim to want through procedures designed to produce admissible evidence and sustainable convictions. I understand the appeal of bucket number one. I really do. Child predators are genuinely dangerous, weird, and creepy motherfuckers. Institutions feel inadequate. Watching confrontations feels like justice. The emotional satisfaction is real, but justice isn't a feeling. It's an outcome. And by every measurable outcome that matters, bucket one vigilante operations fail catastrophically. Vigilanteism is wrong. Not because I'm sympathetic to predators. Once again, check my hard drive. Fuck you. I'm squeaky clean. Not because I'm naive about institutional problems. Yes, I know. Give me my Israel money. I know I'm a bail bondsman. But because the data shows that it makes everything worse. Cases fall apart. Investigations get compromised. Violence erupts. Innocent people get targeted. Predators learn to be more careful rather than stopping. And children, the ones that these groups claim to protect, get nothing but performance art in place of where protection should be. If you want to help protect children, Demand funding for ICAC task forces. If you're in Region 2 of the state of Ohio, you would write a letter to Jim Jordan or our state senator, Marcy Kaptur, if I'm not mistaken. With that being said, we have to push for platform accountability. Like these social media companies